everybody. We're going to get started now. Hi, Cambria. Hi, Oliver. Thank you, Max. Welcome, everybody. I'm Daisy Berbeco. I'm the state representative for Winooski, 1 of 2. The other is Chloe Tomlinson. I want to welcome you to this conversation tonight. And I think first I want to ask that we acknowledge this land that we're gathering on. This gathering is taking place on traditional and unceded lands of Abenaki people who have stewarded this land for generations and continue to do so today. We honor their enduring presence and deep connection to this region. As we come together to discuss the future of our communities, let's do so with gratitude and respect.
Oh yeah, we need to slow down so we can.
Yeah, I hear you. For the people whose land we inhabit, and recommit ourselves to policies and practices that uphold justice, equity, and sovereignty for all Indigenous people. Next, I want us to acknowledge and respect Winooski's sanctuary school status tonight. The Winooski School District is a designated sanctuary district, one of the first in Vermont, and that means that our schools have made a formal commitment to protect and to support all students and families, regardless of immigration status.
Daisy, sorry, I need you to speak up a little bit more so you can't hear there and do it better. Yeah.
This includes refusing to share information about immigration status with federal authorities unless legally required, limiting cooperation with federal immigration enforcement on school grounds, and fostering a safe, welcoming environment where every student can learn free from fear and discrimination. Winooski is proud to be home to one of the most diverse student populations in the whole state. Our sanctuary commitment reflects our values, that every child deserves access to education, to safety, to community, and that schools should be places of trust, not enforcement. And finally, I want to recognize the importance of community voice. In Winooski, community voice is the foundation of how we govern and of how we grow. The people who live here, who raise families here, who teach in our schools, and who care for our neighbors, know what's working and what needs to change. And they reach out and they tell each one of us up here every day. It's an honor to get that input and to have the power to take action on it. So tonight's forum is one way that we all work together to do that. It's about creating space for real conversation between residents and decision makers, so that policy isn't something that happens to us, but it's something we all shape together. Tonight is about connection. We know that changes at the state and federal levels can feel distant, but their effects are felt very deeply here in Winooski, especially in our schools, in our healthcare, in our housing, and in our family budgets. That's why I've invited leaders from across our government to join us tonight. You'll hear directly from our State Attorney General, Charity Clark, our State Treasurer, Mike Pieciak, also a Winooski resident, our state senator, Martine Gulick, and our wonderful superintendent, Wilmer, Chavarria, sorry. We'll have a panel-style conversation. And I want each of these folks to kind of speak to some of the issues that I hear regularly from all of you as you reach out to me for help or more information and resources. So first we'll take some time for them to talk about resources and key issues they are working on for you. Then you will have time to speak to them yourself. You can come to the microphone, or if you cannot come, I will bring you the microphone. And you can ask a question to them yourself. We will leave 40 minutes for you to ask your questions to these folks or to me. So whether you're here as a student, as a parent, an educator, a healthcare worker, or a neighbor, this space is for you. So thank you for showing up, and thank you for joining our conversation. And now I want to talk about you. Can you please raise your hand if you live in Winooski? And can you please raise your hand if you are a parent? And raise your hand if you are over the age of 60. This is important for our healthcare questions. Over the age of 60. Okay. Raise your hand if you are employed by the school. Employed by the school. You are a staffer or a teacher. Okay, I see Miss Carlton there. Raise your hand if you are currently looking for a job. If you are looking for a job. Cambria, you're looking for a job? Raise your hand. Okay. Attention, please. Order. Raise your hand if you do not have health insurance, you do not have Green Mountain Care, you do not have Blue Cross Blue Shield. Raise your hand. No health insurance. Okay. This helps us to understand who you are. That's very important when we're talking to you. We want to know who you are. The last one, the most important one. Raise your hand if you have one question for our panelists tonight so that I know to come find you later in the program. George Cross, of course you have a question. Okay, I see you, Coralie. I will be sure to get to you. Okay. Mary, you have a question? Okay, I will come to you. Okay, thank you. Now, I'm going to ask our esteemed panelists to please introduce themselves. Charity.
On? Yeah. How many minutes would you like? Would you like me to go through my cases now?
Let's do 5 minutes introduction first.
Okay. All right. So I have the privilege of serving as your Attorney General in this amazing state. I was elected for the first time in 2022. Lucky me, I had a term before Donald Trump was elected president. And extra lucky me, before I became Attorney General, I worked in the Attorney General's office for 8 years. So I have a really helpful foundation in knowing how to navigate this office during this critical time for our country and for our state. It's important to know that while President Trump is overturning norms and violating the Constitution and federal law and destabilizing the economy and the stock market, cozying up to people we used to think were our enemies and now he seems to think are our friends, his approach to immigration has been offensive, appalling, and un-American. And attacking prestigious universities and law firms, and the list goes on. What we can see is very clear, is that all of these actions are designed to consolidate power within the presidency, within the executive branch, within Donald Trump himself. Thankfully, this is America, however, and in this America, we have no kings. We have instead the United States Constitution, which when I was sworn in this January, I swore an oath to uphold and protect. So we are this wonderful melting pot of immigrants. We believe in freedom, and our Constitution is fundamental, and we have no kings. This is incredibly informative to the way that I have approached this moment, because it is my job as your Attorney General, every time the President violates the Constitution or federal law, to bring a lawsuit. And that's what I have done many times. I actually have lost track. We'll talk about those later, but there are many cases that we've had to bring, and it's a shame because it's a waste of court resources and my office resources and the federal government's resources, because we pretty much keep winning these cases, and it's a shame that we're wasting all of this time. I like to remind my constituents it's really important to remember all the power that we have as people in this country. So I'm heartened to see everybody here tonight. It is a privilege to be in this space with you, and I want to thank Daisy so much for putting this together. It's wonderful. I always am so uplifted to be in community, and it's great to be here tonight, so thank you.
Well, thank you, Charity, and thank you, Daisy, and the fellow panelists for being here. I'm Mike Pieciak. I'm the state treasurer here in Vermont, and as Daisy mentioned, I'm also a Winooski resident. I've lived here in Winooski now for 11 years. And I think, a little bit about me and my background. I grew up in Brattleboro, and what I love so much about Winooski is the sense of community that we have in our city. And it reminds me of growing up in Brattleboro. It reminds me of the experiences I had as a little kid, spending time in our downtown, knowing the folks that sold us our groceries and our goods, and knowing the neighbors, and really building that community and looking out for each other, which I think we do really well here in Winooski also. And really why I'm interested in this work that we're doing in public service, which can be really hard, and it can be particularly hard in moments like this, but all the more critical in moments like this, is that sense of community I got growing up in Brattleboro. My parents showed it to me. My dad, a small business owner, he spent a lot of his time volunteering for the community. He helped bring lights to our football field so we could have Friday night football games, so that we could have that sense of community. He helped bring a teen center to Brattleboro so that kids had a safe place to hang out after school. He helped expand a golf course from 9 holes to 18 holes. And I had to ask him on that one, why did he spend so much time working on that project? He didn't even play golf. And he told me that, Brattleboro had done so much for him, Brattleboro had done so much for our family, that it was the least he could do to find ways to give back. And I think that is something that continues to motivate me today, and I think something that motivates a community like Winooski as well, trying to find those opportunities to give back. And my mom, similarly, she's very different in her background and how she contributed to Brattleboro, but she founded a soup kitchen when just before she was pregnant with me 40 years ago, and ran that soup kitchen for 40 years. And I used to go around with her to the Brattleboro community, and I'd look around and I'd say, she'd be delivering food to people, and I'd say to myself, boy, like, these folks are shut in, these folks are vulnerable, these folks have been forgotten about by much of our town. But my mom was so kind and compassionate and caring for each and every single person that she interacted with, and it really instilled this idea that every person has value, everybody matters. And again, that's another key value for this moment in time. Whether we're working on issues that pertain to Vermont government, or whether we're working on issues that the federal government is presenting to us in the way that they're unfortunately going about their own work. But we need to remember that idea that everybody has value, everybody matters, and we need to look for ways to provide opportunity, ways to provide economic mobility, and ways for our neighbors to look out for each other. So that's a little bit about me and why I'm so passionate about this work and so passionate about working in government at this moment in time, and look forward to the conversation that will happen this evening. Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Senator Martine Larocque Gulick, and I live in Burlington. I was a high school teacher for many years, so I am so happy to see all the students here tonight. A+. You were definitely well done. Extra credit, there we go. I am now in the Vermont Senate. I serve as vice chair of the Health and Welfare Committee, and in the afternoons I'm on the finance committee. I also serve on the Burlington School Board. I've been on the board for 8 years. And we're getting excited to open a new high school, hopefully in the fall of 2026. It's really exciting. It's been a long time coming. Our students have been studying, as you all know, in an old Macy's building, and we've really turned lemons into lemonade. It's been hard, it's been a struggle, but I think at the end of the day, it's really brought our community together in many ways. So thank you for being here, students, and I look forward to having a great discussion tonight, and I will pass it on to Wilmer.
Hello, everybody. I'm Wilmer. I am the superintendent of the schools here in Winooski. No, I was trying to model to do a pause so that interpreting could happen. That's why I stopped. So anyways, I'll be pausing like that every once in a while so that people can interpret. Now I can continue speaking. Welcome, everybody. Welcome. If you're here, it means that you care. And I appreciate that you are here. And that includes you. It means that you care and that you remember that you answer to your constituents and you take that seriously. Thank you.
Thanks so much. It's so good to hear more about you all, and I totally agree with Wilmer, the fact that you all take time out of your very busy schedules to come hang out and learn more about Winooski and the issues that are really pressing to us is, it means a lot. And I think there are some things that we want to share with you also. And first of all, I'd like to talk about, I think there are really 4 different topics that I'm hearing a lot about from Winooski residents. And those are immigration / civil rights, right? We have large immigrant community, as well as a lot of LGBTQ folks that live here. So I want to hear about, with this new administration at the national level, what is happening in Vermont to protect us. I mean, we've done a lot, I think, within Winooski City. We're looking at things we can do to help residents, but can any of you speak to a charity? You started to speak to some of the legal action that you've taken. Can you help us understand ways that the state is protecting us as immigrants, also LGBTQ folks?
One of the things that has been challenging is I too have heard a lot of concerns about immigration, but immigration is a federal issue and not a state issue. So state officials like Mike and me and you even and Martine, we only have so much power, but we do have power, and it's critical that when we do have power, we are occupying a space. And one of those areas is focusing on the role that our state officials play when it comes to immigration. Our law enforcement, for example, is supposed to focus on public safety. That is their job. That's what they're instructed to do. That is what by law they must do. They are not to be commandeered by the federal government for their immigration purposes. That is codified. It's in statute. And it's important that the governor shares that philosophy, but the governor is not on this stage tonight. But if people had concerns, that would be another player who isn't here tonight and does supervise the state police, for example. That's under his branch. So that's important to know, that there are areas where we do have power and we have to exercise that power. I would also say that we have wonderful resources here, and one of those is in the form of the Vermont Asylum Assistance Project. Probably some of you here have heard of them before. They are absolutely wonderful, a great resource. I will also say my office probably this week will be putting out a guidance. I've read the draft and it hasn't been finalized. A guidance on immigration to help folks, because while we don't have a big lane when it comes to immigration, we do have a lot of lawyers and who can do research. In addition, I'm proud to say that my office has been involved with a number of lawsuits outside of Vermont. When you file a lawsuit, you have to have what's called standing. Standing means you are the appropriate person who can bring a lawsuit. For example, if one of you got hit with a car, your friend can't sue. It has to be you. They're not the right person. It has to be you, someone who was actually harmed. And for that reason, things happen. We have no lane. But there is an ability to file what's called a friend of the court brief, a piece of paper, also known as an amicus brief. Amicus is Latin. And that is a way that we can join on the efforts and express what the lawsuit might mean for Vermont, the impact that whatever is at stake in that lawsuit has on Vermont. So I have made sure that Vermont's voice is heard in some of those cases as well, and we are trying all that we can do to do. So we're always looking for opportunities as well. It is a critical issue. I'm proud to be a Vermonter and see our great judges doing good things, our great federal judges, but it is an area of frustration for me because there is such a limit to what I can do when it comes to that issue. So I don't know if others want to.
So, on this issue of immigration, it's clearly an economic issue for Vermont. The future of Vermont, if it's going to be successful, is going to require a lot of immigrant labor, a lot of immigration, a lot of folks moving to Vermont. Immigrants have always been part of the American story. My family obviously immigrated here from places, and they played a role in Vermont, in Massachusetts, in Connecticut, in places where they lived. And that's been the history of so many Americans at various times. And it's no different this time in America, and it's no different this time in Vermont. We need immigrants in many ways more than they need us here in Vermont. It's clearly an economic issue. But more important than it being an economic issue, it's really a moral issue. This idea that people's due process, people's rights can be taken away without appropriate evidence being presented, without an appropriate hearing to weigh that evidence and have the person have an opportunity to speak back and say why the government didn't get it right. The whole approach to individuals is terrifying, and it makes you angry, because when a single person's rights are impacted, all of our rights are impacted, and all of our rights can be impacted. That's why I think this is one of the most important issues that we can focus on in Vermont and across the country. So one thing that we did just a couple of weeks ago with Senator Ram Hinsdale is launch an immigration legal defense fund, where we are going out and raising money and putting it toward more infrastructure. We have 30,000 non-citizen residents here in Vermont, but we only have a handful of immigration lawyers. So when they're confronted with immigration challenges, it can be hard to get the legal resources that they need to be able to adequately defend themselves. And when you don't have a lawyer, when you don't have adequate legal representation in our legal system, let alone dealing with immigration law, which is highly complicated, you really don't have due process. You don't have what is promised to you under the Constitution. So legal representation is critical, it's important. We've set a goal of raising $1 million that will help fill out that legal infrastructure for organizations like that, the Vermont Asylum Assistance Project. They have the courage, they have the experience, they have the know-how. They just don't have the legal infrastructure. They don't have the paralegal support, the case intake support. They don't have the time to train the hundreds of lawyers that have volunteered to be pro bono lawyers for immigration matters because they can't break away and provide them the training. We're hoping through this effort that we can build in that infrastructure and that it will be a permanent infrastructure to serve these Vermonters.
Thank you, Mike. That's great to hear. I know that Vermont Legal Aid also has a website with some resources for immigrants if you need help, and they are free. We can talk about immigration all night, I think, because it is one of the issues that keeps me awake at night. There are many people being arrested, and it is scary. And we don't know if this is going to intensify in Vermont. We don't know much about why it's happening. And I wish there was something comforting that we can offer, but I think I could speak for all of us that we are very, very concerned. And I feel one of our best protections is that we have a very good Attorney General who is fighting very, very hard for justice. I think this next issue I would like to skip to is education. So maybe what we can do is have a brief discussion here about a bill for education reform, and then we can take some questions on education. Does that sound good? Okay, great. Wilmer, I'm going to ask Wilmer to start us off with education reform. Can you give us an overview that how we got to where we're at now? And then maybe Martine can tell us about 454.
Yes, there's many ways to start the story, and it's hard to know where to begin. But I will begin the story with a law called Act 127 from a few years back. There's a thing called critical race theory, and one principle that one of the offshoots of critical race theory establishes is that whenever something good happens for communities of color or a community from an ethnic or linguistic minority, there will be absolute and swift backlash. So the law, Act 127, was a good thing for our students in Winooski. But the majority of our students are Black, brown, immigrants, speak a language at home other than English. And so the good things that came to Winooski from the law were supposed to be only short-lived. Because the theory is right. We will not be allowed to have justice without backlash. And many excuses are used to justify that backlash, except racism. Nobody will say it out loud. So a lot of those excuses are being used to throw the baby out with the bathwater and just change education entirely just so we don't give a penny to brown and Black people. And that is where we are today. As always, education is being used as a political tool to achieve specific agendas. And the so-called education reform bill being discussed at this moment and first proposed by the governor and his agency of education is a tool for a lot of those politics to play out. And ultimately for the interests of the people with the most means and the people from the cultural and racial majorities to maintain their power. So yeah, I am extremely mindful and watchful of that process, and I will allow our senator, with whom I align quite a bit on her opinions, to tell us a little bit about the law that's being discussed.
It's very difficult to follow Wilmer. He said it. He said it. And everything that he said is absolutely true for Burlington as well. I think in the last few years, we finally got the appropriate taxing capacity to fund our schools appropriately and fund our students so that they could achieve the outcomes that we proclaim that we want from our students. So it's a really hard time right now because we are taking on a massive reform that will likely result in our students not getting what they need. And it's hard for me. It's hard for Wilmer, and it's hard for all of us who are here tonight, I'm sure. So I've been doing what I can in my committee to steer things in the right direction, but it's hard when you're just one voice. So tomorrow will be a big vote in the Senate on this bill called H-454, and I'm going to be a no vote. I've been really clear about that. I think this bill will do harm to our system for many reasons. I'll outline a couple. It's going to put in a funding formula that is not data-driven. It was not empirically derived, and it underfunds the system right from the get-go. We have an expert in the state of Vermont. Her name is Dr. Tammy Colby. She's world-renowned for determining what schools need to achieve outcomes. And she gave us a number that would provide an adequate education for every student in Vermont. But the Senate lowered that number. So I'm not going to vote yes on that. Also, as part of this reform, we have to put together new school districts. So we have to rethink how education is delivered across the state and how our governing structure looks. This is a huge, huge undertaking. The Senate decided to create a committee made out of 4 senators and 4 representatives to figure this out over the summer. I hope that sounds absurd to you, because it is. And the other piece I want to bring up is the timeline. The House of Representatives, which is the body that Daisy serves in, put together a good bill a good bill. It's quite a better bill than ours. It still had its problems, but they put together a timeline that was fairly realistic. And the Senate just made everything go faster, sped everything up. And so I think we're heading for disaster unless we can fix this bill, and I'm hoping to do that. I'm hoping that we can make it better. But I want you to know what's happening. It is, to echo Wilmer's words, it's troubling for all of us. But we'll keep fighting, and we'll try to make sure that we have a decent outcome at the end of the day for our students and our communities.
I'm going to be a no on that bill as well, if it comes over looking like it did. I'm hoping someone does a floor amendment before third reading. So I want to stay on the economic part of that, though. Mike, are you able to speak to what the implications are for us in terms of property taxes with that bill?
Well, I guess I would say it's probably too early or uncertain as to what exactly it would mean, whether it's for Winooski or for Vermonters overall. Certainly the property tax conversation over the last year, kind of the last few years, has driven us to this place. And we want to try to find a way to provide adequate and, well, not adequate, really exceptional education at a price that Vermonters can afford. And in some ways that's driving the conversation. But, will it be an actual savings? Oftentimes those things are hard to calculate. And oftentimes when there are synergies that are expected, they don't bear out that way. I know through Act 60, this is the previous consolidation sort of initiative that was done in the early 2010s, I guess, mid-2010s. There was a hope that there would be savings achieved through that. And it's hard to quantify whether there were or not. There were a lot of consolidation, but not necessarily a lot of achievable, measurable, identifiable savings. And property taxes have certainly gone up since 2014, 15, and 16. And then, of course, I don't think the Department of Education in Vermont was tracking those savings either. They didn't have sort of really clear, articulable, measurable goals for what they were trying to achieve from a financial savings standpoint. So I think Act 60 is a good lesson for us to learn from and say, let's not repeat that and in sort of the name of efficiency or synergy, assume that there are going to be these savings. They need to really be concrete and specific, and we need to measure them. And Martine would be better at saying whether she believes we have that in the current proposal. And maybe based on Wilmer's head shaking, the answer to that is no.
Thank you. I just want to say one of the things that frustrates me quite a bit about what's happening in the Senate right now is that big decisions are being made just on someone's gut feeling, not on actual numbers, not on actual modeling, not on actual just sitting down with me, the superintendent of Winooski, and asking me, what's this going to do to Winooski? Nobody, except for our delegation, 2 senators out of 3, have asked me what this will do for Winooski. But Winooski has done the modeling, and no, none of the scenarios they're looking at is going to do anything good for the taxes in Winooski. If anything, there's a potential for substantial increases and a substantial decrease of the quality of education our students will be receiving.
I would agree with Wilmer. The bill doesn't address cost drivers. So the things that are driving up costs, like healthcare, like inflation, like the deferred maintenance of our schools, none of those are addressed in the bill. Also, we didn't take a long look at the education fund to see what's in there that maybe we don't need, or what's in there that maybe shouldn't be there, which is problematic. And so we're not necessarily going to save money. And if we do save money, it's just because we are slashing. We are cutting, and not in a thoughtful way. So that is problematic. I just quickly, wanted to speak to the notion of consolidation. I think that Mike Pieciak is correct. When we combined schools, we weren't really thoughtful on collecting the data. But if you talk to the districts that did consolidate, I think they have evidence that they did save money. What they did was they reinvested that money into their schools and into their programs. So it's hard to quantify, but it is there.
So before we move to audience questions, I want to give Mike a chance to talk a little bit about what's going on with our economy. There have been a ton of changes by the Trump administration, tariffs, all the stuff that I don't understand because I'm not the economist or the state treasurer. Can you give us some updates about what your office is doing in response to those changes?
Yeah, well, there have been a lot of impacts to the economy in terms of the entire country, over the last 4 months, ever since Donald Trump took office again. And there are 4 things in particular that I think about and worry about for Vermont and the impact on the Vermont economy. One is our state budget. Our state budget that the legislature just passed and sent to the governor is a little over $9 billion. And about 37% of that is made up of federal funds. So over $3 billion are expected to come from the federal government when we have a budget in place for the next fiscal year. Now, most of that $3 billion is through shared joint programs that the state of Vermont and the federal government administer together. The federal government has said we should provide health care to people who are vulnerable, to elderly individuals, to people who are in poverty, to young kids. And they provide states money for that. And then the states go about designing a Medicaid program to make sure we can deliver on that for Vermonters. So it's not like the federal government is giving us the discretionary $3 billion. We've been in partnership with them over a long period of time to deliver these joint programs. But that has really changed in this administration. The way they approach their responsibilities, the way they approach these long-standing programs, and Medicaid in particular is one that is right on their chopping block. Original proposal that came from the House of Representatives would have meant that Vermont would have lost hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars, $2 billion over the next 10 years, $200 million a year in terms of Medicaid loss. So that means fewer people covered. It means maybe people not covered as well. It could mean rural hospitals under even more stress. Maybe they are not able to stay open. So it means really across the board a loss of access to healthcare. So I worry a lot about the intertwining of our federal government and our state government, this long history of partnership we've had, and what that means in terms of its impact on our economy if those funds are cut. The other thing to think about for the Vermont economy is that we have a significant number of people that work in the nonprofit sector. 1 in 5 Vermonters, estimated, work in the nonprofit sector. Nonprofit sector brings billions of dollars of economic activity to the state of Vermont, employs thousands and thousands of people, plus they also deliver on their mission of doing good in our communities as well. So they're a really important piece of our economy. There was an analysis by the Urban Institute that looked at all the nonprofits in the country, including in Vermont, and looked at how many have federal contracts. And in Vermont, over 1,000, I think it was, had federal contracts. It totaled over $600 million a year. So separate from that $3 billion that's coming from the federal government to the state of Vermont, nonprofits directly are getting $600 million a year from the federal government. And the Urban Institute said, well, if those contracts stop, what percentage of those nonprofits risk insolvency? Their revenues can't cover their expenses. And for Vermont, it was about 67% are at risk. So that's significant because there have already been attempts to freeze funding to nonprofits or to cut funding to nonprofits. And I think we're just seeing another wave of that in the last few days. So that's something that's vulnerable. The other thing is trade, like Daisy said. You know, you think about the impact of tariffs on Vermont, both in terms of the impact of tariffs on Canada, which is our #1 trading partner, our economic ally, our neighbor to the north. You know, that is really discouraging because those long-standing relationships are being frayed. And there's a lot of anger on both sides of the border about what's going on, but there's a lot of anger on the northern side of the border about what's going on, both in terms of trade and in terms of the divisive rhetoric that the president is using. So that has an impact across the board on us. That means when we have tariffs, there's going to be higher prices for Vermonters. We estimated, Daisy, to your question about property taxes, that it would be $1 billion of added cost to Vermonters annually if the tariffs that were proposed in April stayed in place for the entire year. So just to put that in perspective, when property taxes went up last year, and that caused this entire conversation that we're talking about, the state of Vermont brought in about $200 million in additional revenue based on those property tax increases. So this would be a huge, huge impact. It also has an impact because those Canadian tourists aren't interested in visiting Vermont, not because it's Vermont's fault, but they're not interested in visiting the United States. And in Vermont, we depend heavily on tourism. It's a $4 billion industry. We rely heavily on Canadian tourism. They have visitations annually of hundreds and hundreds of thousands, and they spend over $150 million in Vermont annually. And some parts of our state feel that even more, like the Northeast Kingdom or downtown Burlington, that gets an outsized proportion of Canadian visitors. So one thing we did a week ago or so was we went with a group of Vermonters up to Montreal, and we met with a group of folks from Canada, and we said, you know, we are sorry. We did not choose this fight. You did not choose this fight. We did not choose Donald Trump. You did not choose Donald Trump. But in this moment, we can choose our friends, and Vermont chooses Canada, and we hope that Canada chooses us. The event was called At Par, so we went to Canada and spent US dollars at par for Canadian goods. It was a symbol of respect and friendship to pay a little bit extra for things that we bought from Montreal that day. So I think we need to find ways to differentiate Vermont from the United States and say, you might dislike the United States, you might dislike Donald Trump, but please don't dislike Vermont. We are your friend, and we want you to continue to visit Vermont over the next 4 years, and the relationship will last well beyond that. And the last thing I want to just touch on that we're really highly dependent on the federal government is natural disaster relief. You know, Vermont is #4 nationally per capita in the amount of federal funding that's come in over the last 15 years to help us recover from natural disasters. You know, this is an area where the president has a lot of discretion. They have the ability to declare a major disaster declaration. That begins the framework of FEMA coming in and assisting. So with that discretion, it gives me a lot of concern that Vermont is so highly dependent on FEMA and the federal government in that space. So those are the diagnoses of the problem, and we talk about what we should do long-term to try to sort of, you know, protect ourselves and become a little bit more independent and a little bit more able to withstand some of these changing federal policies. But those are the 4 things that I'm most focused on and concerned about.
That's great.
And to layer onto that, as I said, as your Attorney General, it's my job to uphold the Constitution and sue when the Trump administration has overstepped their bounds. I think we have a lawsuit in every single one of those issues saying Congress gets to decide how to spend the taxpayers' money. That's in the Constitution. If Congress has decided, for example, that Vermont should get this money from FEMA because of our flooding disaster, it's not for the president or his executive branch to say, no, we're not going to send that. So in all of these issues, when it comes to money that Congress has appropriated, that Congress has decided should come to Vermont, we have brought a lawsuit. And some of those are older than others, but now's a good time to say, we have a chart on our website. If you go to ago.vermont.gov, you can find a whole chart of all of our lawsuits with explanations and links to the lawsuits themselves.
I will be looking at that, and if you send me a link, I'll post it on my webpage too. You know, while we're talking about money, I quickly want to touch on a couple things in healthcare. One is affordability, and Martine, I want you to jump in, but I want to be sure we talked about property taxes and about how H454, the education reform bill, really, and in its current state, does not improve our property taxes. That was the whole, well, not the whole, but a major thing that we wanted to fix with this education bill. So there are other ways that we actually are addressing property taxes. One is in improving healthcare costs, right? Because schools pay a lot of money for staff benefits. The largest part of that is their healthcare expenses. So in my committee, House Healthcare, we are working to reduce the cost of health insurance. And we have a large healthcare reform bill. We have worked with the Senate back and forth. We have passed several bills this session. One that I want to point out is a doula bill and a birth centers bill. If anybody in Winooski is interested in opening a birth center, we are very excited to have a birth center in Winooski, so talk to me if you are interested in starting a birth center here. Our healthcare reform bill is something which we hope will bring greater oversight and accountability to our hospital system mainly. Our hospital network is very unstable right now. So we are giving Green Mountain Care Board, the regulator, greater authority during the hospital budgeting process. We are also supporting primary care better. I would like to see primary care in our community, at the community center instead of in the hospital. Martine, would you like to say anything about healthcare, and then I want to get to questions?
No, I think you summed it up nicely, Daisy. Healthcare is very complex, and to be able to talk about it is not easy. But I think you did a good job of summing it up, what we're trying to do.
And I mentioned your doula bill. We have Martine to thank for that doula bill. Okay, so anybody, George Cross, I know you have a question, Mary has a question. Please make your way to the mic here that's set up in the center of the aisles. Or if you'd like me to bring you a mic, I'm happy to do that. Just raise your hand.
I will try to speak quickly, but it's hard for me to do that. I welcome everyone here, particularly the superintendent of schools. I think probably everyone on stage I have some connection to. Charity was around when Act 60 was first thought about, and knows the time when I spent working on that. I grew up in Brattleboro also, long before Michael did, but I donated to those lights on the football field. Thanks to Coach Denver. Martine, I'm not so sure about, she's in the Senate, but you know, what can we just say? You gotta be somewhere. Daisy is probably as good a representative as Winooski has had in a long, long time. We've had a lot of fun with her and participated in one way or another. And my mentor as far as legislative work was Mrs. Cassavant, so you could know that that was a good training in that part. And I did serve in the position that Wilmer is now in, and for a period of time. But my question is simple. Back during the Act 60 revolution that I participated in, the fight was both community versus community, but it was also rich versus poor. And what I haven't heard from this audience at all, or from any of the speakers, is the difference between the rich and the poor. The legislature does not represent the people of Vermont. And that's a big problem. And it certainly doesn't represent the people of Vermont today. It might have represented the people of Vermont 100 years ago, but it doesn't represent them today. I've been around long enough. I've been here twice as long as Mike has been here. I was here before Charity was probably here. I certainly was here before Wilmer was here. It's a problem. How does a foundation aid even meet the needs of the Supreme Court decision that generated Act 60? It simply does not meet the requirements of that period. And yet the Senate is about to vote in a foundation aid program. My end of my question.
Martine. Okay. Great, that's a great question. The question was about Act 60, which I think many of you know was a court decision that said that Vermont had to provide an equal education, an equitable education to all students. And I think, we tried to do that. One issue is that I'm not sure we're succeeding right now because some communities vote for their school budgets and they adequately fund their schools, and then other communities don't vote for their school budgets. And so they have to make cuts, and then they vote again. And if it goes down, they have to make more cuts. So you do end up actually with a landscape that is not equitable. So a foundation formula, actually, if it's properly funded, and if the weights are properly determined, could bring us to potentially a more equitable scenario. Right now, the problem is that people want to start with a low foundation, and some folks want to allow communities to raise money above the foundation. That's called supplemental spending. And my question in my committee was, how will that not go directly against the Brigham decision, which was Act 60? Because to me, it does. You go back to a time when the rich towns could raise more money than the poor towns. So it's a good question to be determined, but well taken. It's a constitutional issue, for sure.
We have another question coming. This is going to be a good one, I can feel it. No pressure.
Hi, my name is Medina, former student of Winooski, and I also work at the family home. We have a lot of immigrants and asylum seekers. Thank you. So my question is, we have a lot of immigrants that are becoming citizens, and a couple of them got deported while trying to take their test. So how can we prevent that from happening again? Because they are terrified now, they don't want to take the test. They're concerned of getting deported without seeing their family. So we're trying to see what we can do in order to help them out, get their citizenship, and get on the way.
Well, your concerns are validated by most of the experience that happened just 3 or 4 weeks ago in Colchester when he went to go take his naturalization test and instead was met with USCIS officers that arrested him. Again, going back to the point I was making earlier, I don't know what the evidence was that I never heard it articulated, never had an opportunity to hear that in court, never had an opportunity to refute that. It was just people that were unmarked grabbing him and taking him away. And his family didn't know where he was, his friends didn't know where he was, and it was very scary. I think the lesson in that, and why I wanted to support this immigration defense fund that I mentioned, is because Mohsen was able to get an attorney. There were some circumstances that led to him staying in Vermont. They were trying to get him out of Vermont as quickly as they could, because they knew that a Vermont judge would treat him more fairly than another state that they were trying to bring him to. It's the same reason that the Tufts student that came through Vermont on the way to Louisiana was tried to sort of leave Massachusetts as quickly as they could. But Mohsen was able to get an attorney. They were able to have a habeas corpus petition filed, and they were able to keep him in Vermont. So I think this point is important on immigration. I think this point is important on transgender students that Daisy brought up earlier. I think this point is important for law firms that are being attacked. I think this point is important for higher education institutions that are under attack. That all of these institutions have been threatened. All of these individuals have been threatened. When we're able to stand up and fight back, we don't just show strength. Folks are winning. Janet Mills in Maine is winning. Higher education institutions are winning. Law firms are winning in court. Individual immigrants that are able to have a lawyer are winning when they bring their case to a fair jurisdiction. So it's why it's so important to make sure there's adequate legal representation here in Vermont, so that you do have your day in court and you do not face deportation alone, which is a terrifying thought.
I would just, a couple of things I wanted to just note. We, as discussed, we are not immigration experts on this stage. However, Vermont is very fortunate to have the Vermont Asylum Assistance Project. So I hope that you're familiar with them and your friends who went through this were working with them. They are incredible. The Vermont Law School also has a clinic, and our congressional delegation can be very helpful, another resource for folks. So I just wanted to point to the experts to say they would, I'm sure, be very helpful in providing advice and support. I wanted to make sure that I said that to everyone who's listening to the question.
But I think it's a great question, and I would also like to know, how can I protect my friends, my constituents? Do I go with them to a meeting? I mean, obviously, I think staying in Vermont is important, but I think, what are the nuts and bolts of how we can help individuals?
So one way that's so critical is by being a witness. So if you are with a friend and ICE is trying to abscond with them, getting out your phone and recording. The other thing to keep in mind, there's a lot, we'll have this in our guidance. Luckily it's fresh in my head because I just read it this morning. If ICE ever comes to you and you have to ask for a warrant, and you don't, and if you need interpretation, you are entitled to that. You don't, if they hand you a document you can't read, you are entitled to understand what's going on. If they don't have a warrant, it's that's a letter from a judge, right?
Yeah.
It's a completely different category. So it's important to know your rights as a witness, to be the witness, and then call the Vermont Asylum Assistance Project.
Charity, just to clarify.
Yeah.
If they have a warrant and you cannot read it and you cannot understand English, then what?
Then you are entitled to get an interpretation. To say, this is not my language, and I mean, obviously I'm envisioning that conversation might be hard, but frankly, if you're worried, if you're watching this and you're worried, why not have a friend translate that and keep it in your pocket in English, saying, I know by law I am entitled to this. Prepare in advance. If you're feeling anxious, prepare in advance.
That's what I do. If I'm feeling worried or anxious, even if I think this isn't gonna happen, but I'm feeling worried, take those kinds of steps. And again, I can't say enough about the resources we have here in Vermont. Another thing I want to mention, Mike spoke earlier about we really don't have a lot of immigration attorneys in Vermont. However, the Vermont Bar Association, which we're all basically members of, is a wonderful organization. They do have free, which is called pro bono, legal services, and also something called low bono, which isn't free, but it's at a discounted rate. So another option would be to contact the Vermont Bar Association and see, have you sorted out pro bono lawyers to help in this space? I think our immigration lawyers in Vermont, I've heard, are very overwhelmed right now, but that also is worth reaching out to say, there is a need here, can you help us?
And both of you, thank you so much. Those are incredibly helpful tips. I will publish on my website, I was just polishing it up tonight, I will publish some of these tips later tonight, so you can look at my website. I'll put it on Instagram for Rep Berbeco. Then you can go to my website from Instagram for those immigration tips and things you can do to prepare if you are ever arrested, like the suggestion that Attorney General Clark made.
Can I also just say, as your senator, I will go to a meeting or an interview that you have. I will be there. You can find my contact on my webpage, and Daisy can probably post it as well. But I think you should bring someone with you if you are going and you feel that you might be endangered. And I know some of my colleagues would do the same. So please reach out.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much for your answers. That's going to be relatable to many ethnic groups here and the ones that are not here as well, because they are even afraid. They don't understand that you guys might be allied. That's how bad it is for some ethnic groups. They are persecuted and there are many families who are suffering, many kids who are suffering, specifically from the Latin American community. And we need to know how that $1 million is gonna trickle down to actually those families who are in desperation of getting legal services. Many of them are being robbed by scams, or by organizations or pretend services. They are offering that they are going to help, and out of desperation, they are giving $4,000, $5,000 out of pocket, and they are stealing their money because they are trying so hard to be able to get the process that can help them and not being torn apart. They'll get their husband, their parent taken away. Many women with kids right now are without their partners. Many kids are without their fathers because they are being taken out of the streets, out of their work, out of their homes. And this is a very serious matter. I am here lonely for the Latin American community because they are afraid to step up, even ask those questions. I wanted to let you know that each of you are very important to them. And they are watching and hearing very carefully. They just don't know who to trust. And we will appreciate everything that you're doing, but it's important for you to make accessible that information and what you're doing to them. Because the reality is there is a deep disconnection between legislators, representatives, state house, and the grassroots, especially that background, Black, brown community who are undocumented, who are invisible slaves. They are current invisible slaves. They are running our economy, and you well mentioned it, and that are not contributing greatly to the United States and being treated like animals.
I just wanted to address, thank you, gracias. That was very, very well said. I wanted to mention that you said scams, and I wanted to say that a scam is a crime. Let's keep that in mind. If someone is scammed, you can make a police report. But first step is to use my office's consumer assistance program, and they might be able to help you get your money back. We don't ask questions about your background. It's just, that's what they do. The consumer assistance program, you can reach them at 1-800-649-2424. So if people in the community are getting scammed related to immigration, please contact my office so that we can try to offer support for how to get through that and potentially could get the money back depending on the situation. So I just wanted to flag that as a resource.
I was just gonna say the importance of localizing supports and making sure that the people that go to families are people that are trusted. The word trust came up a couple of times in Coralie's question. We do, in Winooski, the Winooski schools have a 30-member rapid response team, so in an emergency, we activate that resource. We also have a home visiting program. So if you have identified, and this goes to the other comment that was made before, people that are afraid and are in their homes, refer them to us because we send a team of liaisons, interpreters, educational experts, familiar faces that you know when you bring your child to school. We come to you and we sit down and we listen to what your specific case is. Because the majority of cases don't actually, please reach out for legal help when you need it, but the majority of cases actually don't even require a lawyer. And I say that, me having filled out a million forms, being an immigrant myself, coming into this country on an F1 visa as a student and then everything else, I've never had an immigration lawyer. But what I do have is the ability to figure out forms, to figure out processes, and that's not necessarily something we take for granted for our families. But we do have people in the school district, as should every district in the state, and that's another conversation, that can go to our families to ensure that this is not added stress on the parents, added stress on the children, that we can at least invest some money that we didn't budget for, but we have to answer the need in the moment. We will be there. So we have those two things, the rapid response team, and we have the home visiting program that we're funding. So we're gonna spread the word. But that's not to take the responsibility away from our state offices. I still hope that we can put pressure on every state office at the state level, because Winooski might have a community sense and we take care of each other, but we have immigrants all across the state. And I'm sorry, that was really fast. I got too excited.
And one thing just to add on Wilmer's point about the responsibility of the state of Vermont, a group of stakeholders, and Senator Gulick, Martine Gulick, was the lead champion of this bill that would create a study committee to look at establishing an Office of New Americans in Vermont. The Office of New Americans is a concept that's been employed in other states, including in New England. It's something that our office, myself, this Federal Transition Task Force that we put together, all endorsed, because I think having an Office of New Americans to be a coordinating office for all of the needs of New Americans, immigration needs, economic needs, social needs, housing needs, is going to be really important for our state to be competitive, to attract and retain the immigrants that we need to power our state forward. So that is a study, that's something that passed. It's going to be done this summer and this fall, and I hope it will lead to the establishment of the office, because that's important infrastructure, again, to make sure we have a place that welcomes in our immigrant community and make sure that they have the services that they need to be successful in Vermont.
I need to follow up with that, because that is specifically that statement. And I wanted to make sure that you guys understand that it's not that written and theoretically is a great idea, but if you don't involve the right players in that office, and it actually in the details are the devil, right? And so if you don't make sure that office actually has the, first of all, power to be able to execute and help to get the resources, and the power to be able to implement those resources on the ground, and also to be able to do the connections to the right communities, direct to the communities, because you need to understand that immigrants and refugees has been monopolized by some organizations, and that cannot continue. It's important to understand the system and how things have been happening in order to be able to, that initiative be successful in all part of that, overall problem that is already been happening, because the established organizations are just somehow perpetuating the oppressive system instead of trickle down those resources and the empowerment that needs to, be able to bring to the community. So, and it's the same with the $1 million that you guys are raising, which is a great idea. But if you're not making sure those resources going to organizations that are working on the ground with people who are needed right now, who are listening to these, these problems, then again, those resources are going to be washing away, and the community on the ground will still be left with no support or the resources that they need. Sorry for it. Thank you.
That's actually something I wanted to say. My name is Amy. I'm a resident of Winooski as of late, recently. But I wanted to say thank you to you, Mike, and the other colleagues who founded that new, what's going to be the Immigration Legal Defense Foundation. And to that woman's point, when we're thinking about how that money's going to be spent, and I just donated because I thought this is really such a great idea and so critical to get this up and off the ground. But when Wilmer was talking about home visits and what this woman has just said about involving at the community level of folks who are already doing this work and reaching out and have the contacts with community members who need those kinds of services, my hope was, that all those great ideas would sort of coalesce, and hopefully that's something that you and your folks working on raising that money will be thinking about to get the greatest success. But my question, it was actually about the new act that's going to be voted on tomorrow, and Senator Martine mentioned you're going to be a no vote on that. Do you have any sense of why the sponsors of that bill, how they justify not listening to the data, and where the levels should have been set to ensure equal and good education for everyone in the state? Kind of how that's, what your prediction, I guess, is at the end of that too? Thank you.
That's a good question. We could spend all night talking about that, but.
And you've been asking it.
Right, I've been asking it in committee and I haven't gotten a good answer. So unfortunately, I don't have a good answer, but I think there was a sense that the foundation formula that was empirically derived, which would have provided an adequate education to all students, was too high. Yeah, it was a little over $15,000, and the newest proposal is 14.7 or 14.8. So the governor's goal is to either try to lower property taxes or at least look as though he's trying to lower property taxes. So yeah, sorry, I can't give you a better answer at this point.
I see no good reasons why, other than, never mind. Winooski is according to our modeling, by that base, which underfunds public education across the board, not just for Winooski, but we would lose about at least $3 million from our current budget. That is equivalent to close to 25 full-time teachers. So you can do the math there.
I'd like to follow up on that and ask Martine, now this bill is coming to the floor tomorrow. Now amendments are going to be proposed. I think you and Senator Hardy have one in the kitchen. How do we find out what amendments are coming up when, so we can properly urge our legislatures to do the right thing?
That's a great question, Steve. And by the way, thank you. Steve's been watching our committee meetings every day for several weeks. They're kind of boring, so I appreciate you tuning in. Honestly, at this point, I'm not sure which amendments we will propose. The politics of this are actually a little bit beyond me. I'm still a fairly new senator, so I'm not exactly sure what's going to happen tomorrow. So honestly, Steve, I don't know.
Well, is there any notification that happens? I mean, does it show up in the calendar?
An amendment can show up on the calendar, but we can also just bring an amendment to the floor, and it could be kind of a surprise amendment. So there are different ways of doing it. Daisy, do you want to add to the political process?
No, I was just going to suggest looking at the calendar in the morning.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Can we anticipate some surprise amendments from you?
I don't think so, to be honest, at this point. But
that's what will make
we'll
it a
see.
surprise. Yeah.
I'll try to read the room.
Hello, my name is Mary, and I'm a student, a current senior at Winooski High School. And thank you all for taking the time out of your day to come visit us this evening. And my question is centered around what Wilmer brought up earlier. Understanding the current political climate, there are bills and laws underway that have potential to drastically impact all Vermonters. And during those decisions, there's room and potential for tension and personal bias and other things in the way. Understanding that, how do you keep and hold yourself accountable and your colleagues accountable when making those decisions?
Yeah, that's an incredible question, Mary. Thank you so much. Accountability. I mean, it's so interesting because we often, I think, as policymakers, think about doing that to the other branches, right? But for ourselves, how do we do it? I think the first tool I think of is one that was developed by the Office of Racial Equity, Susanna Davis's office. She created this tool that every committee in the House has. And I will just say, we do not consistently use that tool, but we strive to. It's a new thing, so we're trying to create a new habit of using it on every legislation that we take off the wall, so that we work on. But the tool, it has a bunch of questions in it that we pose to either ourselves, or some committees use it as a discussion tool for the entire committee. And it really looks at makes you look at your bias and who the policy will impact as you're developing it, so that you can begin to think more outside yourself and outside of government, right? So you are really placing yourself back in the community and back in other communities that you don't identify with. So that's the first tool I think of.
Yeah, that was an amazing question. I like to think about courage and bravery, because it's hard in politics. Sometimes you're being told you should say or do one thing. I try to listen to my heart. I try to listen to my moral compass. I try to think about my constituents who are really important to me, and then I try to make a decision that I think is the right one. It's frustrating sometimes in politics, and I hope some of you decide to run for office someday, and I mean that sincerely, I really do. We need you. But it's built on relationships, which is nice. I mean, I like Mike and I like Charity, but sometimes we make decisions based on our relationships and not on whether it's a good policy or not. And that's a problem. You know, relationships are important, but looking at a policy and if it's good is equally important, if not more important. So, great question. I'm going to be thinking about it all night long because it was really thought-provoking. Thank you.
And Mary, I would say the Office for Racial Equity that the governor has was not consulted when they put their education reform proposal together. I asked Susanna Davis point blank, and she said she was never asked till this day. So I don't know whether they consider communities of color at all. I would guess not.
Thank you for noting that, Wilmer.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Kamal Dahal. I have been Winooski resident since 2019, and I chose to be in this town because of all the amazing people and amazing representatives we have got in this town. So I'm here mainly because I wanted to ask one philosophical question. We have a lot of questions, nitty-gritty questions about the bills that are on the plate that you're about to vote on. But I was listening to Mike earlier, and he detailed all the ways that the federal government can hold us hostage economically. And listening to that, you know, it is very possible that those economic pressure can be used as a bargaining chip to undo a lot of progresses that we have made nationwide, but also throughout the state. Whether that progress is for protecting minority rights, immigrants' rights, or rights for all the people. So my question to you all is, how strongly committed are you to protecting the values in the face of economic pressure? In other words, if you were to choose between accepting a FEMA resources to protect the vulnerable Vermont infrastructure and all the towns versus supporting certain policies that protects the rights of certain individuals. This sounds like a hypothetical question, but in this day and age where anything is possible, it is quite you know, a reality. And that's the fear a lot of immigrants like us feel and we go through, because as an immigrant myself, you know, I talk with a lot of folks from our community members who have seen this power play where leaders rise up, scapegoating certain groups of minority. And then when it comes to facing that political pressure, you people usually back out because people want to retain that power. So that's my question, is how strongly are you committed to protecting those values, even if we are faced with the very risky economic consequences? Thank you.
So it's a great question. You know, I was mentioning earlier all those different entities and organizations that have been challenged by this administration. And usually when they're challenged, it's usually economically in some way that they're being challenged. Higher education, law firms, different states. And I mentioned that it's important to fight because a lot of people are winning, first of all, in those fights. But it's also important to fight because when that state fights, when Maine fights, it means that Vermont doesn't have to fight. They've taken that burden on, and we're all going to face a burden, I think, with this administration at some point. And we need to fight back both for the people we represent and for those that may be less resourced, less able to fight for themselves in other venues, other circumstances, other states. So I think that's important. If you were to take a very micro look at it and say, boy, you know, this X number of dollars for transportation funding, and I think there's a transportation scenario that's not too far from the one you're talking about, you know, that could be a real impact on our state and on the people in our state. But you take a bigger look and you take a bigger lens, you know, that money that doesn't come is going to be a temporary challenge, and there are ways to get around it. But that decision to capitulate to the federal government is going to live with us forever. And there are law firms that, in my opinion, have capitulated to the federal government, and they will never be the same, regardless of what they say. They have made a decision to put their economic interests over their values, over protecting people that work for them. And when they make that decision, it doesn't end there. The government comes back and says, thanks for capitulating. Here's another way we want you to capitulate. And here's another way, and here's another way. And it goes to a place that is very dark. So it's important to fight back and make that clear. And I think in Vermont, we should do it aggressively, loudly, and boldly.
I will, yes, here. It's a great question. I just want to quickly also offer a little scenario, which is in the Health and Welfare Committee that I'm on. My chair, Ginny Lyons, and I, when we were looking at the budget and thinking about the budget for next year, we prioritized basic needs for people. We prioritized keeping people safe, keeping people fed, keeping people housed, the basic needs, because we know the scenario that we're in. And for example, I'll just give one small example. There's an organization called Bridges for Health, and the line item for that was around $500,000. They provide medical care to folks around the state who might not be able to, who aren't able to afford it. We made sure that that got funded and that we put that in the budget because it's critically important. And yeah, I just wanted to offer that as one example of how we're prioritizing things at the state level.
Okay, I just wanted to do a time check real quick here. We're gonna wrap up soon, so if you have a question, please make your way to the mic so we can gauge how much time we have. Okay, so Tul has a question, Katie has a question, and then you're next, okay?
I just wanted to respond quickly to that question. You're asking for reassurance, which I want to deliver to you. As far as I have seen in my travels these past 3 or 4 months, everyone in leadership, everyone in a position of power, including frankly Republicans you think maybe wouldn't feel this way, are appalled at what is happening on the federal level and keep showing up. But here's the thing we have to remember. When, for example, the Trump administration makes up that we are required to comply with their nonsensical DEI executive order, or we're not going to get federal money, everyone has to know that's nonsense, and we just have to be brave and say, no, we're not going to do that. And I brought 2 lawsuits over that nonsense, the DEI one and then the immigration one, and we'll see how it goes. This was just last week. But it's really critical that we remember what Mike said. They're not going to stop, they're just going to keep asking for nonsense. So we have to get in touch with what's real, what's legal, what's constitutional, and then we have to be brave. What I've seen largely is people in Vermont are doing that, and we need everybody to keep doing that. And I want to offer a statistic to also reassure you. During the first Trump administration, my office sued the Trump administration 62 times. We prevailed in some fashion 60 times. This is not a man who wins a lot. He loses a lot. And let's be honest, I'm seeing the cabinet this go round not being nearly as competent as the first go round. So hopefully we will have similar success. And so far we have. So I wanted to offer that reassurance. And I know we're short on time, we're over, and I do have to go, so.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Tul.
First of all, thank you everyone. I know like you have answers for all present here. My name is Tul Nirola. I also work at the Winooski School District as a multilingual liaison. I revoice my community actually. So instead of asking question, there's a small story. It's very important. Everybody should listen to this one. I don't take longer time. Why there is anxiety in the Bhutanese community in America? I just want to bring up to you all because it is very important. News of ICE arrest and the deportation has led to widespread anxiety and panic among the Bhutanese community in the United States. Since March, ICE officials have detained at least 60 Bhutanese refugees living in the United States. At least 13 have been deported back to Bhutan. These people were resettled here with proper documentation, but were targeted by ICE for committing petty crime. We were refugees and we came to this country legally. Yes, these people, they might have done something wrong, but they need to be punished by the law of this country. It's the voice of our people. So these deportees are in limbo. At least 13 individuals were deported to Bhutan, but we have only been able to verify the whereabouts of 4 people who are not in Bhutan, but in police custody in Nepal. 3 of them said they were among the deportees sent to New Delhi, India on a commercial plane accompanied by ICE agent. From New Delhi, they boarded a flight to Paro in Bhutan, where officers housed them at a hotel and offered them meal. Then each deportee was placed in a separate room, questioned individually. They were told that their parents had already left the country. They were asked if they knew the official language, Dzongkha, if they knew anyone else in the country. So the authority laid down the conditions for staying back in Bhutan. Then they were told that Bhutan was not their country. The deportees were coerced into saying they did not want to remain in Bhutan. Then the Bhutanese official transferred them to Phuntsali, that is the Bhutanese side of Indian-Bhutan border. The Bhutanese official arranged for taxis to take the deportees through India to the Nepal border. None of them have any documentation. With the help of some agent or the local people, they enter Nepal illegally because no one has the paper. And they went to Bedangi. There's a refugee camp still there. Some people live in the refugee camp. They were caught and taken into custody by local police, along with another deportee who was apprehended crossing the border into India. Another deportee said that at least 2 groups of refugees were deported from the United States. These people are stateless now. We are not welcome in Bhutan, and the deportees now are in prison in Nepal. These people are truly stateless outside the United States. So we always say, all the Bhutanese community, we had a lot of meetings, and we always raise a question about deportation is not an option for the Bhutanese refugees. We are not safe back in Bhutan. So I just wanted to, it's not a question, just take this story and reflect on it, and then I know you do your job, how to stop this. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing that with us. Okay, real quick, Katie?
I think that's the follow-up. My name is Tika Timsina. I'm a tax practitioner here in Vermont for my refugee communities, working since 10 years now.
Can you speak closer to the microphone, please?
Oh, sorry. My name is Tika Timsina. I live in Colchester. I'm here in Winooski school district because most of my communities live in this school district. I have 3 questions, basically, very simple. They may be complex to solve, but these are questions that are coming from the community, not about myself. The first question is with respect to the story author has gotten here. What is the resources for people who are already deported, what they should be doing? Number 2, I have never heard of American refugees in another countries. I would rather call them as American refugees in the rest of the countries wherever they're taken, because they were already granted those documents, and we should be phrasing our terminology in that way. This second question is regarding the budget and the tax codes. What are we going to do tomorrow when the budget comes in, cut in? What is our plan for those who are living here, who are already in a tax burden, who are already paying way too much tax for too rich people who have been given those opportunities to save taxes, which I have seen through my eyes being a practitioner, how they save money, and I cannot tell this because this is a tax, right? So, is there any program that can, is there any tax code that can give relaxation to the public during the time the government is cutting the budget to the state? As you said, that even the Canadian neighbor aren't trusting us. How are refugees and immigrants going to trust you while they were coming here with so many years being in refugee camp? They were screened for so long time and they passed everything. After they come to the United States and settled here, they didn't get their citizenship or immigration status overnight. They have to hold for 5 years at least, pass that test. And how is this possible? Why we are here now? That one of the members who's been deported is from this city, who has a legal document, who is very closely connected to my family. They have children, they have family, they just recently married. This guy is deported. And what are the process for those families? What resources you can support us? What are you going to say tomorrow in the meeting or in the Senate or Assembly, whatever? That's my question. Thank you.
So I think, Martine, I saw you perk up when he asked for resources. I don't want to put you on the spot, but did you have something?
I think if I understood the question about property taxes, we do have income sensitivity in this state. So if you're at a certain income level, your property taxes should be sensitized to that income level. I'm happy to speak to you about that some more, but you should not be paying property taxes on your property if your income is at a certain level. So, Mike, do you want to get into more detail on that or no? Yeah, so that was all I wanted to say. I am curious about how we can help folks who have been deported, if we can help them.
I would also suggest for that, go to Vermont Legal Aid, the website Vermont Legal Aid, because I think for at least 2 of your questions, they have some assistance for you and answers. So they are a wonderful resource, and please look there. If you cannot find what you need, then you contact me, okay, or Martine.
Yeah, Vermont Legal Aid can be trusted. They are a trustworthy enterprise.
Vermont Legal Aid is not dealing with immigration cases. So are you sure that Vermont Legal Aid is doing that? Because the last thing that I knew, they are only dealing with family preparedness plan.
So Coralie, they do have resources on their website. I don't know that they provide legal assistance, but they do have resources on their website. I was there this week.
Have any resources for people who are already deported?
Right,
yeah.
Okay, we can talk afterward, but I was on their website this week and they had resources, and if they've taken that down, that's news, because I was
and
just there.
And Daisy, I think you were speaking to the property tax question too, right? Before, with Vermont Legal Aid, no? Okay.
That's the HI 144 form that Martine's referencing, by the way. Just so we all know that. Super simple to fill out. Yeah. And the threshold this year for joint income on a household is $120,000 for the year. If you make less than that, no matter who you are, you can get a discount on your school side of your tax bill.
Thanks, Isaiah. Okay, Katie, we have to wrap up soon. We have children to put to bed, but if you have a very quick question.
I think so. I'm Katie, I'm a Winooski parent, and all of this stuff is horrifying to hear about, but the education stuff is especially kind of frustrating because it's not a federal thing. It's happening within everyone in our state who has control over it. And so I guess the most distilled version of my question is, why are we letting Phil Scott's politically agenda-driven, non-data-driven plan anchor both the House and the Senate bills? The Democrats still have the majority. So why is this being talked about like it's an inevitable thing when we know that it's not just, it's going to negatively impact our communities? That's kind of my question. Why is there still such a strong chance that it's going to go through?
It's a good question. I'm not in leadership, but it's my understanding of what has happened this session is that early on in the session, leadership in the legislature decided to give the governor an opportunity to come up with a plan. He normally comes in late at the end of the session with plans. And I think they were surprised that he said, okay, I am going to work on a plan. And he did come forward with a plan. So I think that is just kind of how the whole thing has been set in motion. And I don't necessarily agree with it, but that is how it has played out.
I think I would add that I haven't heard from anyone who is cheering on the bill as it currently is. But if it passes, I think that will be because the legislature came into this biennium saying education is one of our top 3 priorities. We have to fix this problem now. And there are people who believe that it's more important to pass something than to pass nothing at all.
What's the problem?
Okay. If you would like to follow up with any of us, you may contact us by email. I think it's safe to say most of you have my email, which is how you got here, or my social media account. All of these beautiful people are also available on social media or easily found online. Mr. Wilmer is here at the school. I want to thank you all for coming out and making time this evening when you are undoubtedly doing other important things with your families. It's good to see your faces, and let's do this again sometime soon.